10,000 hours. That is how long it takes to become world-class at anything. Not good, not competent, world-class. 10,000 hours of practice and you join the masters. The pianists, the athletes, the chess grandmasters, the surgeons who operate without looking at their hands, 10,000 hours. It has a clean simplicity to it, a promise almost. Put in the time and the skill arrives. That sounds like the kind of number someone made up on a stage to sell books. A round number. A convenient number. It is neither of those things. It came from a laboratory in West Berlin, and the person who found it has spent the last 2 decades explaining that almost everyone who quotes it has gotten it wrong. In 1993, a Swedish psychologist named Anders Ericsson walked into the Music Academy of West Berlin with 2 colleagues and a question. He wanted to know what separated great musicians from good ones, not talented from untalented. Every musician he studied was already at one of the best conservatories in Germany. They were all talented. That was the entry fee. He wanted to know what separated the best of the talented from the rest of the talented. The Academy's faculty helped him sort their violin students into 3 groups. The first group were the stars, the ones the faculty believed could become international soloists. The second group was strong, good enough to join professional orchestras but not to lead them. The third group were the ones training to become music teachers, solid players, not exceptional. Ericsson asked all of them to estimate how many hours they had spent practicing alone since they first picked up a violin. The results came back clean. By the age of 20, the soloists had accumulated roughly 10,000 hours of solo practice. The orchestral players had logged about 8,000. The future music teachers had put in around 4,000. The number matched the skill. More hours, higher level. No exceptions in the data. No one in the top group had taken a shortcut. No one in the bottom group had secretly outworked them. That study sat quietly in academic journals for 15 years. Then, in 2008, a journalist named Malcolm Gladwell picked up the number and put it in a book called Outliers. The book made the number famous. Gladwell applied it everywhere. The Beatles played over 1,000 performances in Hamburg nightclubs before they became the most recognized band on earth. 8 hours a night, 7 nights a week, performing for rooms full of drunk strangers who would leave if the music got boring. By the time they came back to England, they sounded like no one else. Bill Gates got access to a computer terminal in 1968 at the age of 13, decades before most people had seen one, and spent roughly 10,000 hours programming before he dropped out of Harvard to build Microsoft. The pattern seemed locked, put in the hours. Get the mastery. Chess told the same story from a different direction. In 1973, Herbert Simon and William Chase at Carnegie Mellon studied the game's strongest players and found something they could not find a single exception to. No one had ever reached grandmaster level with less than about a decade of intense, focused play. Not Bobby Fischer, not anyone. They estimated a master had spent somewhere between 10,000 and 50,000 hours studying positions. The number kept showing up at the same door from different hallways: music, computing, chess. 3 completely different skills. Same neighborhood of hours. But there is a part of this that Gladwell left out. A part Ericsson spent years, publicly and increasingly frustrated, trying to correct. A part that changes what the number actually means. The violinists in Berlin were not just practicing for 10,000 hours. They were doing a very specific kind of practice. Ericsson called it deliberate practice, and it had rules. It required a teacher who could identify exactly where the student's technique broke down. It required exercises designed to target that specific weakness, and nothing else. It required immediate, accurate feedback. It required working at the edge of current ability, in the zone where the music sounded wrong and the fingers felt clumsy and the temptation to play something easier was constant. It required doing this day after day, year after year. That is what the 10,000 hours were made of. Not 10,000 hours of playing songs they already knew. Not 10,000 hours of comfortable repetition in a practice room with the door closed. 10,000 hours of structured, coached, uncomfortable, targeted correction. Gladwell heard the number. He missed the method. Ericsson said publicly that Gladwell's version was wrong in several ways. The number was an average, not a magic threshold. Some people reached elite levels in fewer hours. Some needed far more. And the hours were never the cause of expertise. They were a byproduct. The thing that actually produced the skill was the method, the deliberate, coached, failure and correction cycle that happened to accumulate to roughly 10,000 hours at the highest level of violin performance. The number was a shadow on the wall. Everyone stared at the shadow. Nobody looked at the thing casting it. In 2014, a team of researchers led by Brooke McNamara and David Hambrick decided to test this directly. They gathered every major study that had measured deliberate practice across every major domain and ran a meta-analysis. The results were not what the 10,000-hour rule would predict. Deliberate practice explained 26% of the difference in performance in games like chess, 21% in music, 18% in sports, 4% in education, and less than 1% in professional careers. Less than 1%. In the domain where most people try to apply the rule, their jobs, the number of hours practiced explained almost nothing about who excelled and who did not. Somewhere between 74 and 99% of what separated the excellent from the average was something else entirely. Starting age, cognitive ability, quality of coaching, genetics, opportunity. The hours mattered. They were not the whole story. In most domains, they were not even half of it. You have driven a car for years, thousands of hours behind the wheel. You are not a racing driver. You have been typing on a keyboard for tens of thousands of hours. You are not meaningfully faster than you were 5 years ago. You have been having conversations your entire life. You are not a professional negotiator. The hours piled up. The skill did not. Because the hours were not deliberate. They were repetitive, comfortable, automatic. You were not at the edge of your ability. You were in the warm center of it, doing what you already knew how to do, calling it experience because it lasted a long time.
That instrument in your closet. You played it for a year, maybe 2. You learned the same handful of songs. You played the parts you could already play and skipped the parts that gave you trouble. You never sat with a teacher who made you play one ugly transition 40 times until the buzzing stopped. You practiced. You did not practice deliberately. The hours counted on a clock. They did not count toward mastery.
The uncomfortable version of this rule, the one Ericsson actually found in that Berlin practice room, is harder to live with than the version Gladwell made famous. The famous version says, put in the time and you will get there. That is demanding but hopeful. The real version says putting in the time is not enough. You can put in the time and arrive nowhere. You can log 10,000 hours and end up exactly where you started, just older and more familiar with the starting position. The hours are not the price of admission. The method is the price of admission. The hours are just how long the method takes when you do it right. Most people never do it right. They show up, they repeat, they accumulate time. They confuse the feeling of familiarity with the fact of improvement. The clock moves. The skill does not care about the clock.